I was in bed asleep at 7 a.m. when I heard a loud bang. Initially, I dismissed it, thinking it was the large cat tree downstairs that often got knocked over. I rolled over, trying to drift back to sleep, but moments later, my elderly cat came running into my bedroom, leaped onto the bed, and burrowed under the blankets. This immediately jolted me awake because my old, overweight cat hadn't run or jumped on the bed for years. As I tried to make sense of the situation, I saw two men coming up the stairs. Time seemed to both freeze and accelerate simultaneously. My heart pounded as I jumped out of bed, screaming, "Get the f*** out of my house!" The sound of my voice, eerily similar to my brother's, struck me as odd amidst the chaos. Fueled by adrenaline, I chased the intruders through my house, my screams echoing through the halls. I managed to tackle one of them on the front lawn, but he struggled free and escaped. As they sped away in a getaway car, I desperately tried to memorize the license plate number. I repeated it to myself over and over, but the numbers faded from my mind like a disappearing dream. Frustration surged through me. How could I forget a simple string of 7 numbers? And why hadn't I thought to grab my phone? In hindsight, I noticed details I hadn't registered in the moment. I had fractured my arm slamming into the wall at the bottom of the stairs and cut my feet on the splintered wood of the front door. The adrenaline rush masked the pain, and the sense of time became distorted. Some details were hyper-focused, while others slipped away entirely. The raw intensity of a true fight-or-flight situation is indescribable. The hyper-awareness, the sense of time warping, the numbness to pain, it's a whirlwind of sensations that only make sense afterward. Luckily, I wasn't seriously hurt, and nothing was stolen. But the next day, I installed cameras all over my house, a precaution against the lingering fear that gnawed at me. Even now, I replay the events in my mind. The fear, the anger, the helplessness. It's a reminder of how quickly life can turn upside down and how the unexpected can test the boundaries of our courage and resolve. It was supposed to be a quiet night. Jay and I had just settled into bed at his friend's apartment, where we were staying for the weekend. Jim was lounging in the living room, and Jeremy had left earlier, promising to be back soon. The night felt ordinary, uneventful, a simple sleepover at a friend's place. But what followed still haunts me to this day. Jay had just dozed off when I heard a knock at the door. At first, it didn't seem out of the ordinary. Maybe Jeremy had forgotten his keys. I listened as Jim answered, confirming it was Jeremy. But then, a shuffling sound, followed by muffled voices, caught my attention. It wasn't just Jeremy. It sounded like he wasn't alone. I tried to shake off the unease, thinking it was probably just some neighbor stopping by. But then I heard it, the unmistakable sound of a scuffle, the dull thuds of bodies colliding, followed by low, angry voices. My heart raced as the tension in the other room escalated. "Jay," I whispered urgently, shaking him awake. "Something's wrong." He groggily sat up, confusion clouding his eyes. But before he could even process what was happening, we heard it. 2 voices, sharp and commanding, cutting through the darkness. "Get down! Get the fuck on the ground!" Panic surged through me. Jay started to get out of bed, wanting to see what was going on. But I grabbed his arm, pleading with him to stay. The fear in my voice must have reached him because he stayed put, though every muscle in his body was tense, ready to spring into action. For what felt like an eternity, we sat frozen in the darkness, listening to the chaos just beyond our door. The sounds of arguing, shuffling, and what I can only describe as desperation filled the air. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, everything went silent. An eerie, unnatural silence that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. We waited, not daring to move, until the quiet became unbearable. Finally, Jay and I edged the bedroom door open. The sight that greeted us was a nightmare. Jim was lying on the ground, his face pale, his chest pierced by what looked like a barbed machete. Blood pooled around him, seeping into the carpet like a dark spreading stain. Jeremy was on the phone with 911, his voice trembling as he tried to explain the horror that had just unfolded. I could barely comprehend what I was seeing. It felt like I was trapped in a waking nightmare. When the police arrived, they stormed into the building, their presence both a relief and a terror of its own. Jay let them in, and they quickly took control of the scene. They separated us, asking questions we could barely answer, our minds still reeling from the shock. We were placed in the back of police cars, isolated from each other, while paramedics tried desperately to save Jim. I knew he was gone the moment they wheeled him out, his body lifeless and still. The paramedics didn't rush, didn't continue their work, just loaded him into the ambulance and waited. A chill settled over me as I realized we had just witnessed a murder, a life stolen right in front of us. Hours later, after being questioned by the police, they told us we couldn't return to the apartment. It was now an active crime scene, and we were left with nothing. No phones, no wallets, not even shoes. We were dropped off at a nearby coffee shop, the reality of our situation slowly sinking in. For the next few days, we stayed at a friend's place, too shaken to process what had happened. When we were finally allowed back into the apartment, the first thing that hit me was the smell. Metallic, sharp, the unmistakable scent of blood. Cleaning up the remnants of that night was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. Every scrub, every stain that refused to fade was a reminder of the violence, the helplessness, the trauma that had unfolded in that room. It wasn't just the blood. It was the memories, the fear, the knowledge that life could be so easily and violently taken. It was a night that changed everything. A night I will never forget.
A couple of weeks before my 19th birthday, I woke up around 4 a.m. to a terrifying sound. Someone was trying to break down my bedroom door. Groggy and confused, I realized I had fallen asleep with my light on, which now seemed like a small blessing as it allowed me to see the door splintering open. 2 men burst into my room. One immediately attacked me with a hammer, the blow sending me reeling. "Take whatever you want," I shouted, desperate to end the assault. The second man began shoving my electronics into a backpack. Panic surged through me as I heard my mother down the hall, her voice trembling as she demanded to know what was happening. The men exchanged a glance and rushed toward her room. My heart pounded as I realized they were going after her. My mother managed to hold her door closed for a few seconds, giving me just enough time to rush to my closet where I kept a small safe. My hands shook as I punched in the 6-digit code, but somehow I got it right on the first try. The safe popped open and I grabbed my pistol. As I stepped out of my room, one of the men turned and charged at me, hammer raised. I reacted instinctively, firing 2 shots. The sound was deafening in the hallway. The impact knocked him backward, but he quickly recovered and tackled me onto my bed, trying to wrestle the gun from my grip. The second man, now armed with one of our kitchen knives, slashed at my arm and head, the blade cutting deep. My mother suddenly appeared and managed to wrestle the knife away from the second man, but she froze, unsure of what to do next. The man who had attacked me grabbed my DVD player and smashed it over my head. Dizzy and bleeding, I knew I had to act. With a final surge of strength, I freed my gun hand, shouted at my mother to move, and fired at the man on top of me. The bullet hit him and he stumbled back. That was when they finally fled, grabbing the stolen electronics as they ran. When the police arrived, they found one of the attackers dead in our garden, just a few meters from the house. A trail of blood led to the road where the second man had escaped. As I stood amidst the chaos, bloodstains on the floor and shattered belongings around me, the shock was overwhelming. We had survived, but only just.